our session, everyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to directly message me, or if you have any questions, we have a question and answer portion and the chat function where you can ask questions. Please raise your hand to be recognized, and we will be getting started in just a second.
I guess that works, right?
Beats me, I can't see a thing, so it's whatever you tell me is just fine. His efforts, he sends a lot of product out of this town right now.
That's fantastic.
And well, see, that shop right over there is where he stores. And then the shop next to it, he is going to put sort of a FedEx kind of situation in there, so things can be shipped out of here.
Oh, wonderful. Do we have Rick Wade on the line with us, Grant?
Not yet. I think we'll just have to get started, and I'll be on the lookout for him. I know Chuck is here with us.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Colin Wellenkamp. I am the Executive Director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. I am joined here in beautiful downtown Clarksville, Missouri, with the mayor, Joanne Smiley, standing right next to me with her city hall and one of her churches behind us. And the river is just right over there, just down the street. We could turn the camera, but then you and I would just be silhouettes if we did that, considering where the sun is right now. So we're showing the downtown core instead, which is good. This is our forum for Infrastructure Week on advanced resilience. Mayor Robert Eastern of East St. Louis, Illinois, who's just across the way and a little bit south of us from where we're standing here in Middle Missouri, is going to preside over our session, and we're very excited about that. But before we get started with Mayor Eastern, we just wanted to take this opportunity to put a face with everything that's going on and everything that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be putting several faces on it, including Mayor Eastern and Mayor Hassler of St. Genevieve, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half south of us where we're standing. Yes. And but first, Mayor Joanne Smiley, you have been mayor of this town through thick and thin. You're a former executive committee member of MRCTI, one of our founding mayors in 2012, shows your vision and leadership. Almost all of Clarksville's record events in your 103-year history have all occurred during your time as mayor?
15 years.
Wow. So tell us about that.
Well, 2008 was really the beginning. And since that time, we've had 9 floods here in town. The last, of course, was 2019, when we had more than 100 days of water on the ground. And that does not bode well for business. It does not bode well for living. It does not bode well for future. And part of the reason that we're so invested and involved in the process that we're all looking at now for what to do with this water tells you that not only the town, but the ground around us, which is the farmers, is something that we've got to pay attention to, not just for our town, but for the whole of the country. And we are trying to do that. I think the reason that it is exciting for me that you are here today is we know that historians and artists and poets have all written about towns along the Mississippi River. This is one of them. The evidence of what happens to a town along the Mississippi River is right here for you to see, hear, and know. And it is not easy to come back, but the tenacity of this town continues to be there. And knowing that and taking a look at it and seeing that the history of small town USA is at risk if we don't pay attention to this and if we don't do something. Our efforts to defend, to protect have been many, and we have followed advice of everybody from FEMA to the Corps of Engineers on up and down in terms of seeking the answer, the solution, the possibility. And an easy up wall seems to be the best answer for us. And we're looking at that right now. We have an engineering company that is doing a planning and design for us, and it should be finished by October. And at that point, then we go again for the funding.
Yeah, and you're not just looking at that, you're also looking at natural flood storage solutions all around your region.
All around the region,
right?
All around the region, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why it is so important for us to take a hand of MRCTI and hold on tight, because that's our solution. That is the solution, not just for us, but for everybody up and down the Mississippi River.
And it would seem that the state of Missouri agrees with Mayor Smiley, as the state has committed over $2 million to her several times over in order to save a town of just over 400 people. The state realizes the immense importance tourism and outdoor recreation pull that towns along the Mississippi River, like Clarksville, bring to the state, and the opportunities and legacy that they also bring to the state and everyone in this region. So we're anxious to keep this work going.
Absolutely.
Tools like the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund could help Mayor Smiley push this over the finish line, as well as partnerships with folks like the American Society of Civil Engineers, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Ducks Unlimited, and others in what they're doing to help us deploy natural infrastructure can get her to the finish line safely. So it's definitely a two-pronged approach. I'm now going to turn it over to Mayor Robert Eastern of East St. Louis, Illinois, who's going to take us through the rest of our session today. And thank you so much for joining us up and down the Mississippi River and in Washington, D.C. for Infrastructure Week 2021. Mayor Eastern.
Thank you, Colin and Mayor Smiley, for that introduction. Good morning and welcome to the MRCTI Infrastructure Week Forum. That's designed to link advanced resilience and infrastructure deployment at a scale across the Mississippi River and corridor. Today is a virtual event that will present on two broad topics: passes of the Resilient Revolving Loan Fund Act and what's the meaning of the cities and the states working to improve infrastructure restoration forward. Second, we will profile natural infrastructure projects and partnerships that can complete new tools like resilience, revolving loan fund to protect our built infrastructure assets. I'm moderating this panel today as the mayor of my city and as the leader of a course of 100 mayors along the Mississippi River from the headwaters of the Gulf of Mexico. Me and my fellow mayors are all part of the Mississippi Rivers Towns and Cities Initiative. Joining me in this forum is Mayor Joanne Smiley of Clarksville, Missouri, Mayor Paul Hassler of St. Genevivie, Missouri, Mayor Wick Wade, Senior Vice President of Strategic Alliance of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Thomas Smith, Executive Director of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Adi Randid, Managing Partners of 2 Degrees Adapt, Dan Yeoman, Chief Finance Officer of Quality Ventures, and Dr. Ellen Hubert of Ducks Unlimited, who will support the regional project management team to show actual natural infrastructure projects on the ground. For cities along the nation's most important waterway, resilience is the key protecting our economy, reducing our climate risk for the future. Our corridor has sustained over 210 billion in actual losses since 2005. But local resilience is our path forward. Therefore, we need new tools like Resilience Revolving Loan Fund to sustain a physical platform of our economy. The 2019 flood season was truly historic as the longest and largest flood in U.S. history, hitting us before the pandemic swept through. This event was bison-wide, costing over 20 billion, implementing Mississippi River and mainstream to 10 corridor, but not much of Mississippi River, a 31 state basin. This Resilient Reform Fund was enacted into law January 1 of this year. Their RRF will enable us as mayors to bring the local initiative resilient projects online. No one is in a better position to describe the infrastructure challenges than our close partner that worked with the American Society of Civil Engineers to release their infrastructure report card this March than Mr. Smith. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. And thank you, Mayor Eastern. Thank you, Mayor Smiley and Hassler, and all the other distinguished speakers we have at this forum. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today about the importance of improving our nation's infrastructure resilience, which includes urging Congress to fully fund the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund program that Mayor Eastern was referring to. My name is Tom Smith. I am the Executive Director of the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE. We represent more than 150,000 members of the civil engineering profession in 177 countries, or about 92% of the countries in the world. Founded in 1852, ASCE is the nation's oldest engineering society. And you may also know ASCE from the infrastructure report card that we publish every 4 years. This evaluates and reports on the condition and performance of American infrastructure in the familiar form of a school report card that gives some of us a little bit of bad memories and others really good memories. Our 2021 infrastructure report card was recently released on March the 3rd of this year, and I'll give you a little bit more on that in just a minute. ASCE also serves as a leading advocate for sustainable and resilient infrastructure. Promoting sustainable and resilient infrastructure systems is a key priority for ASCE and increasingly the civil engineering community at large. We're developing a future world vision, a visual, experimental, and immersive method to discover new ways to solve sustainability problems. We also co-launched the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure to advance technical expertise and support for sustainability across the globe. We're also in the process of developing a performance-based sustainability standard, meeting American National Standards Institute criteria. And this standard will become part of a suite of ASCE standards that will provide technical guidelines for promoting safety, reliability, and efficiency in civil engineering. We think investments in resilient, nature-based and/or green infrastructure systems provide cost-competitive solutions to many of the challenges facing communities such as those along the Mississippi River, as you've heard about earlier today. As you all know, the Mississippi River is an essential national inland waterway. It generates nearly $500 billion in annual revenue that directly supports 1.5 million jobs. The river also provides 80 billion gallons of fresh water to industries and drinking water to 20 million people in 50 cities. However, all of this is at risk due to aging infrastructure. By 2025, the investment gap for all of our nation's inland waterway systems and ports is expected to be $1.5 billion. ASCE's 2021 infrastructure report card gave our nation's inland waterways a grade of a D+, while the nation's overall infrastructure didn't fare a whole lot better with a grade of C- and an investment gap of $2.59 trillion over the next 10 years. Furthermore, we did a failure to act economic study, which found that our nation's deteriorating infrastructure and our growing investment deficit hurts our nation's economy. Failing to invest by 2039 costs every single family across the nation $3,300 a year in disposable income. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the United States was impacted by 22 separate billion-dollar disasters that killed at least 260 people, injured scores more, and had damages that totaled $95 billion. They include 10 severe storms, 1 wildfire, 1 drought and heat wave, 3 tornado outbreaks, and 7 tropical cyclones in 2020. 2020 also marks the 6th consecutive year in which 10 or more separate billion-dollar disaster events have impacted our country. And in 2019, the United States experienced historically persistent and destructive flooding across the Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi River basins, as you've heard about a little bit earlier. The combined cost of the Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi River flooding, $20 billion, was nearly half the total cost of all 14 of the billion-dollar disasters in that year. However, as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We've got to be proactive and not reactive. For example, according to the National Institute of Building Sciences, every dollar spent on pre-disaster mitigation and preparedness saves $6 in rebuilding costs after a storm. And according to a new study from the Johns Hopkins University's 21st Century Cities Initiative and American Flood Coalition, every $1 million invested in flood infrastructure projects is associated with 40 new jobs in the construction and retail industries. That means every $1 billion invested could be associated with up to 40,000 new jobs across the country. If we want to be prepared the next time a storm hits, we have to start thinking about how to make our infrastructure more resilient and come up with new common sense approaches to communities to help them prepare. As America recovers from the current public health and economic crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, Congress has an important role to play to catalyze planning and spurring investment ahead of future disasters. Prioritizing smart, modern, resilient, lifeline critical infrastructure, including energy, health, and water, is critical to a thriving economy and healthy communities. That's why ASCE has been a proud partner with the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, or MRCTI, and U.S. Chamber of Commerce to endorse the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund. We think that program is very critical. It was passed through Congress just last year, signed into law on New Year's Day, as Mayor Eastern was referring to. This bipartisan legislation would be an important step towards improving resilience and planning for communities across the country. This is a win-win. Not only will investing in disaster mitigation make the recovery process shorter, but it saves the average taxpayer money. ASCE endorsed this bill because we believe it helps prioritize the nation's need to build resiliently to withstand the growing frequency and severity of extreme weather events. Additionally, we believe that investment in pre-disaster mitigation, climate adaptation, and resilient infrastructure, it's just good public policy. It saves taxpayer dollars. The Mississippi River Valley alone sustained over $2 billion in actual losses in 2019 due to just one disaster, as you heard. We must act now on sustainable solutions. There's broad bipartisan and public-private stakeholder support for this program, so we urge Congress to fully fund it with $100 million in fiscal year 2022. Our future depends on resilient infrastructure. As civil engineers, we're thinking about building infrastructure that's going to last for 50 to 100 years or more. I'm sure you all agree it shouldn't take a disaster to spur action. The opportunity to build strategically is right now. Resilience is so critically important to the overall health of our nation's infrastructure that it is one of our 8 key criteria for assessment in our infrastructure report card. One of our key solutions is the need to prepare for the future. That includes considering how to utilize new approaches, materials, and technologies to ensure our infrastructure is more resilient and can recover quickly from significant weather events, as well as supporting research and development that can modernize and extend the life of infrastructure, expediting repairs or replacement, and also promoting cost savings. In closing, I'd like to reiterate our support for this new program, the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund. It can help mitigate disasters and the record-breaking flood disasters that have been occurring along the Mississippi River. It would bring innovative solutions to allow communities like those along the river to no longer need federal disaster funds in the future. The historic floods of 2019 through the Mississippi River Basin, the record-breaking wildfire season in 2020 throughout the West, and the most active Atlantic hurricane season recorded make action on this legislation all the more urgent. I'd like to thank the Mississippi River Cities Towns Initiative for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I want to remind you that you can view our 2021 infrastructure report card at infrastructurereportcard.org. I look forward to working with you all to find resilient solutions to strengthen the infrastructure systems along the Mississippi River corridor, starting with funding the Resilient Revolving Loan Fund program. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for being such a close partner with our mayors and helping us realize such success around the RRF. A critical component of advancement resilience is being to be able to address issues equally, inclusion, and access solutions to resources. One of our critical attributes for the RRF is design must be easier to administrate and lift the traditional FEMA grants program, which is our most vulnerable communities along with the Mississippi River, simply don't have access to. For this portion of the discussion, I will move things along over to Rick Ray, the Senior Vice President of Strategic Alliances in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me just to speak for a couple of minutes about the work that I'm leading here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Department of Strategic Alliances and Outreach. I think all of you know as mayors and who are fighting these battles for inclusive growth, and particularly around the area of resiliency. And as we begin to think about the hurricane seasons and other disasters, and obviously the disproportionate impact of the pandemic that has had on our local communities across the country, that you're leading the way. And I wanted to come on and thank you for the invitation just to chat a minute about, I hope you will view me as a resource. I am leading on behalf of the United States Chamber of Commerce, all of our efforts as we think about how do we think about inclusive growth in local, in local communities. We launched what we call the Equality of Opportunity Initiative on last year, and is focused on advancing private sector solutions as well as policies that seek to address the inequalities and the gaps that challenge us around creating an inclusive economy at the local levels. And that is everything from how we think about the disproportionate impact of the pandemic, for example, on America's minority-owned businesses. Our research shows that some 66% of minority businesses in America have been concerned about permanently closing. Some research shows that 45% of Black-owned enterprises in the United States have already closed. And so we're leading and leaning in and working with these enterprises, with the Department of Commerce, the Minority Business Development Agency, with members of Congress on putting forth policies that address some of these challenges that minority-owned enterprises in America confront and face, whether it's access to capital. How do we think about connecting them more to government contracting as well as corporate supply chains? We'll be launching soon a whole initiative nationally around connecting more minority-owned enterprises through corporate supply chains and a supply diversity strategy. We're also looking at education and criminal justice and health, the wealth gap in America. And in addition to policies, there are private sector solutions. And as you think about your work in the region in which you're working in every day, I hope you'll view us as a resource and find some value, not just through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but our vast federation of state and local chambers who you work with closely every day. You know, when I was at the Department of Commerce during the Obama administration, one of the things that I got very engaged in was in the area of international trade. And we think also that it's important as we think about global supply chains and the incentives that can be in place for sustainable agriculture and growth across the Mississippi River Basin. There are places and ways where the private sector should be engaged more. I was just reading about Home Depot and this whole area of large container imports being brought back to the Mississippi River Basin. And those are the kind of innovations and things that I'm very interested in, the role of the private sector in helping to develop an inclusive economy and more economic growth in the region in which you all live and work and are working on these issues. So the last thing I'll say is, in addition to international, you know, the reality is, and you know this, that 95% of our consumers, the world's consumers, live outside the United States borders. And we'll be focusing very intentionally on how do we get our goods and products and services exported across the world. And I think there's tremendous opportunities when you think about agriculture in the region of the Mississippi River Basin, and think about farmers, and particularly Black farmers and other minority farmers. How can we bring them in as a part of this economic opportunity when we think about goods and services? The historically Black colleges and universities, we've launched a fascinating initiative with HBCUs across America. I do believe there's great innovation and research and coming out of these universities that we need to tap into more to help solve some of these complex problems. So the Equality of Opportunity Initiative agenda is very broad, it's sweeping, it is private sector led, because we know that the moral case for more diversity, and we hear this term a lot, and inclusion and inclusive growth, we understand the moral case, but there's an economic case to this as well. And that's where we're working with the private sector to lead this dialogue in a partnership with the Kellogg Foundation. They wrote an extensive report called The Business Case for Racial Equity. And it's not perhaps how we usually think about closing the race gaps in America, but with extensive research, they assert that if we address these inequalities and move towards a more inclusive economy, that our GDP grows by $8 trillion. And that is the work that we're leading on and creating more inclusive growth and inclusive economy. And I look forward to, again, and hope that you will view us as a resource in the work that I'm leading at the U.S. Chamber and the work that you're doing across the Mississippi Basin. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you. I look forward to having a continuous dialogue.
Mayor Eastern, you're muted.
Good catch. Thank you. So thank you, Rick, and the Chamber's leadership, and the application to the business community around the solution is key. We will now move to the second portion of our forum, which includes profile of the natural infrastructure projects to support and complement the work of the RRF as implemented. Through this portion, we will cover three priorities. One way to finance a non-conventional infrastructure project that don't necessarily have end user fees, how to determine the national infrastructure to deploy and restore where maximum resilience, how to reestablish natural infrastructure in locations selected. The RFF is a way to finance resilience and support the next project moving forward, but without its sustainable development in general, how do we pay for the non-traditional infrastructure designs to solve non-traditional variables such as climate change and new record events every other year? To discuss this method of the financing and natural infrastructure, please welcome Dan Yeoman with Qualified Ventures.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me today. My name is Dan Yeoman, and I'm the CFO and head of strategy for Quantified Ventures. We are an outcomes-based capital firm that helps structure innovative financing and develops projects to address environmental, health, and economic outcomes. And we traditionally structure our projects in a pay-for-performance way that aligns the capital and the project costs with the actual outcomes that everyone is looking to achieve. And I will share my screen here. Great. So there's two approaches to financing innovation and resilience. Traditionally, it's been through upfront government funding or through project financing. Today, we're going to focus on that second category, which is how can we achieve and put on the ground more resilience projects that are pushing the boundary of innovation to deliver true impact to our communities, and how can we use financing to help unstick some of those projects and achieve the results that we're all looking for. Historically, traditional financing hasn't been a great solution for resilience. And why is that? Well, on the private side, resilience projects don't have a clear repayment stream. For example, there's no energy that's produced from many of these resilience projects that can be sold on a market. So there's not a market for the outcomes that are produced. What is produced are meaningful impacts to communities and perhaps cost savings, both in terms of social costs and actual physical costs. But those are very difficult to quantify and very difficult to incorporate into an investment structure that fits nicely into traditional products that are developed on the private side. As we think about more innovative resilience projects, such as nature-based solutions, there's a perceived risk, which is, are these really going to work? Have these been done before? And of course, with higher risk comes with higher capital costs or just lack of access altogether. And finally, the duration of these investments are typically very long. So the benefits, there's usually a high upfront cost, but a very long benefit tail, which doesn't align well with the investment horizon for many private investors. So how do we solve for that? That's a challenge. Now, if infrastructure has been financed publicly, obviously there's a lack of capacity, both at the local, state, and federal level, to provide the financing to address all resilience issues across the country. There's often restrictions, and I highlight pre-development costs as a big restriction. That's a big need when developing resilience projects. Many programs do not cover pre-development costs, and that results in many projects getting stuck at that pre-development phase. And efficiency. So much financing is tied to what projects can we do versus what results are we actually getting. And therefore, projects can be done that may not produce the outcomes that we need. And as a result, we have costly projects, but not the impact to the communities that we're looking for. And finally, coordination. So we're learning that the more you can do up front, the better cost savings and benefits you have in the long term. Well, the same is true for geography. When we focus on watersheds and regional master plans, we can often save money and do things more efficiently and get bigger impact by strategically coordinating what resilient projects are done in which area of that watershed or region. But if those watersheds or regions cross state boundaries or municipal boundaries, those are really hard for traditional public sources of funding to finance, at least at the municipal, county, or state level. So here are some tools that we use at Quantified Ventures. We customize all of our financial structures to the needs of the actual project and the outcomes that are going to be achieved. And through over about 100 projects, we have a toolkit of a number of different levers that we can use to get projects unstuck and on the ground. So the first is using a traditional municipal bond and aligning that municipal bond with the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So we'll talk more about this in a case study, but traditional municipal bonds we'll raise the money and do the project. There's no tracking of outcomes. There's no reporting to constituents or the investors of where those outcomes actually achieved. By doing that tracking, by doing that outcome verification, it, one, introduces accountability, two, provides metrics for learning for future projects, and increases transparency to all stakeholders. The second lever is blending public and private financing to lower capital costs. I mentioned the high capital costs associated with using just private capital when there's perceived risk associated with a project. There are many public sources of capital that can be blended with private sources of capital. So for example, if there's a very big water quality element to a resilience project, state revolving funds are a great source of capital that offer more flexibility, longer terms at lower rates that can help projects move forward. Procurement contracts to buy outcomes. This can increase efficiency and transfer performance and execution risk from a public stakeholder, such as a municipality, county, or state, to a third party, such that that performance and execution risk is now in the hands of a third party, and they're responsible for getting the outcomes achieved at a certain cost and a certain time frame. This can really help public entities that have capacity constraints, or where the projects are very complex, where there's upstream, downstream components to a project, and there's lots of moving parts where it's too difficult for a single public stakeholder to actually organize all of those different stakeholders. Subsidizing projects can also help. We can subsidize projects through the monetization of ecosystem credits, such as carbon, and other benefits, such as economic development. And we often look at this as a tool to help subsidize the overall cost of a project. We mentioned the importance of looking at these projects at a watershed or regional level. Creating a regional crediting system can help incentivize those projects to go in the places where you're going to get the most impact relative to the cost. And so those are also a great tool. New tax districts. So when we have locally focused resilience projects, how can we align the benefits with the cost of that project? And new tax districts are certainly a way to do that. There's a lot of nuance and consideration that goes in that in terms of which area of the private sector can bear that responsibility or bear that additional cost. We see this a lot with ports, for example. So ports are a good example where a new tax dish or a new revenue stream from a port to finance resilience projects can be beneficial for all parties. And finally, has been talked before, the importance of revolving funds, both to finance pre-development costs, but also preventative projects that can help offset or reduce long-term impact and cost to communities. Let me highlight two examples from our recent work putting those tools into action. This is Hampton, Virginia. Now, Hampton, Virginia has been, like many communities, has been inflicted by a lot of local flooding due to where it is and the geography and topography around where Hampton sits. This year, Hampton issued a municipal bond, an environmental impact bond. It was $12 million to put in 3 green infrastructure projects that will then manage or address that local flooding. And the innovation here is not just to do the projects, raise the money and do the projects, but it's a commitment, and this is in the bond disclosure forms, to track and monitor and report on the environmental outcomes that are achieved by that green infrastructure. And that is an innovation in this world of municipal bonds and the world of green bonds that is introducing transparency, accountability, and performance reporting to resilience financing through a municipal bond structure. What are the results from this? Well, institutional investors really loved the structure of this, the outcomes reporting, and it was oversubscribed from a lot of the major institutional investors. And they reported back to us that this is the future of what they want to see with municipal bonds and environmental financing, which is they want to be able to tell their constituents the environmental impact that's being achieved from their investments. So we truly believe this is going to be the future of public financing and private financing, which is tying projects back to the environmental, social, economic outcomes that are achieved from a project. And finally, this is a great learning tool for cities because they can use this environmental impact bond, for example, with this green infrastructure, to learn what works, what doesn't work, tweak the model, improve the model to implement a regional or master plan green infrastructure program at scale. And finally, the second case example is a nature-based solution that is got initiated in Iowa and is now up and running in Ohio and in Illinois, and will be up and running across the Midwest and up and down the Mississippi River in 2022 and 2023. And this model pays farmers to implement best management practices that have water quality benefits for downstream municipalities and also sequesters carbon. The water quality outcomes, in this case, the ecosystem credits that are produced from these practices, we monetize those by selling those water quality outcomes, which are verified by third parties, to downstream municipalities, state departments of agriculture, and the federal government. And then we stack the carbon benefits on top of it. And there's lots of companies out there with very aggressive sustainability goals that are searching for carbon credits, especially in agriculture and their supply chain, to help their supply chain, the resiliency of their supply chain, especially as commodity prices fluctuate. This is an additional revenue stream for those farmers that is tied to the practices they're doing, not necessarily to the price of the crop that they're producing. And finally, the use of SRF funds. SRF funds have been a key part of this program, providing the flexible capital to pay farmers upfront to do these practices. So traditionally, there would be a very expensive source of capital or a lack of capital to actually pay farmers to do the work. And then many farmers would say, we can't do the work without additional financing to buy the seeds or to do the work. Well, SRF funds have been a very important lever in unsticking this project, providing that upfront capital that is then repaid when the water quality and carbon benefits are sold to the corporate and government partners. So thank you for your time today. We're very excited about finance and innovative finance for resiliency and delivering environmental, social, health impact to our community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. We know that the natural infrastructure such as wetlands, marshes, forests, areas connected to floodplains and connected to backwater areas reduce our disaster impacts and regulate our waters much more efficiently with greater benefits than any other of our built infrastructure options. We also know that natural assets brought online before 2019 helped us weather the flood better than we would have without them. But we also need the empirical data to prove the ability to these deployments to absorb disaster impacts and scale, taking the majority of the river corridor to account. To accomplish this, we partner with 2 degrees adapt to support design and to carry out a study and enable us to provide policymakers an ability of natural infrastructure to us to shield our cities from billions of dollars in actual losses. It costs us mere a fraction of what we would save to deploy natural solutions that we would achieve so many more benefits like cleaner water, better quality of life, enhanced outdoor recreation, and biodiversity. 80, the form is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Eastern. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction, Mayor Eastern, and thank you to Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative for partnering with us. We're 2 degrees adapt, and our mission is to make climate resilience actionable by quantifying the economic impact of various climate perils, such as flooding, fire, others individually or in combination with each other, and then helping public and private sector entities evaluate technology strategies and providers to adapt to the changing climate. For this specific project, our goal is to develop the business case and roadmap for investments in natural infrastructure along the Mississippi River, so that we can add capacity to these ecosystem services and mitigate the flood risk. We have constructed a cohort of sponsors and research partners, Cargill, Black & Veatch, One Architecture, chief among them, but also Ducks Unlimited, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Nature Conservancy, and Social Finance. The idea is not only to raise money to do the study, but to bring in expertise in nature-based solutions, in engineering, in landscape architecture, and private sector asset owners along the river. A number of us, including Mayor Eastern, Mr. Smith from ASCE, others mentioned increasing frequency of floods. The question that we have tried to answer here is, what will a 1% flood look like in 2030? We already know that 1% floods are occurring not every 100 years, but every 20 or 30 years recently. And the question is, with changing climate and increased precipitation, how will that impact the discharge and the flood intensity? So 2 degrees adapt selected 35 locations along the main stem of the river, and that represent all 100 MRCTI communities. These are places where we had a high quality data available for the past 30 years. So we analyzed the flood discharge and flood height, and then projected forward up to 2100, what will be the median change in 1% flood discharge. And we use 16 different IPCC models to come up with this median number. We, of course, have the variations within those models too. And our findings are quite consequential. So in general, the floods get larger and larger between 2005 to 2030. There are some locations north of St. Louis where they do get smaller prior to 2030, but everything south of St. Louis, you'll have 5, 10, 20% higher discharge for a 1% flood relative to 2005. By the time we get to 2050, all 35 locations all along the main stem experience larger and larger floods. Now, what does this mean in terms of the existing gray infrastructure, the levees and barriers? So we received the levee characteristics for a number of these locations, and we analyzed the probability of failure of these different levees that I'm going to show you. And we have selected these 17 levees in 13 cities for further analysis based on the probability of failure. So you will notice that a number of these are above 1. What does that mean? That means that if a 1% flood occurs in 2030 at this location, this levee is guaranteed to fail. That's what the number 1 would indicate here. So you will see a number of your cities represented here, 13 cities. And now we have begun to interview these cities with respect to where there is potential for nature-based solutions. For wetland restoration, submerged vegetation, reforestation, as well as some strategies for floodplain expansion, such as creating setbacks, controlled overtopping. And I'm going to show you our recent interaction with the city of Saint Genevieve, whose representatives are going to speak shortly after me. Bear with me as I load this board. So we partnered with in a conversation with Saint Genevieve in figuring out exactly where is the river, where are the 2 levee systems. Here's levee system 3 that protects the downtown. Here's levee system 2 that protects the agricultural lands, but also some of the potential areas of historical and tourism importance, such as the original settlement area and the old port. And we determined that there is this area that's right next to levee number 3, 75-acre, where the city is undertaking an evaluation of habitat restoration project, and this area in purple that's suitable for reforestation as projects for further evaluation. We're going to take into account not only what happens to the main stem of the river, but what happens to these tributaries, North and South Gabbery. Where has there been evidence of previous flooding, such as these areas of downtown and the historical district? What other co-benefits we can quantify, such as view of the river, water quality improvement, carbon sequestration. So the idea is to create new business models and financial instruments, that a few examples of which Mr. Yemen from Quantified Ventures gave examples of. So all the stakeholders who seek to benefit from these investments can actually participate in these investments. So at this point, I would like to introduce Mayor Paul Hessler, the Director of Planning and Zoning, Mr. David Boa, and the City Administrator for Saint Genevieve, Happy Welsh, and hand it over to them.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be a part of this call, and Happy and David are here. Unfortunately, I'm the only one that's going to be on camera, but that's okay. And for me personally, the river means a lot to me. I have a deep appreciation for the river. I've made my living on it for 43 years now, and I'm excited about what we're doing, and I respect it. Like I say, I've learned over the years that it's hard to tame this big thing, and you're not going to do that. But everything we talked about with the chamber person, it is a viable resource for us, and even in our town. And what I love about this project, it's not my project, it's a community project, and being able to team up with Fish and Wildlife, it's a perfect picture for me, because when I went on top of that levee, and it's a beautiful levee, and I'm so appreciative of having that, because it does protect our beautiful town and all our historic district and several properties, and it's because of that's why we got that levee, and because the history of this town, and we thrive on tourism here, so we have a lot of tourists. But one of the questions I get all the time is, well, where can we go see the river? Because unfortunately, that big, beautiful 3.5-mile levee is a big wall, and it's between us and the river. And with this project that Fish and Wildlife is going to undertake, it's going to connect us again to the river, and people are going to be able to get out, get on our levee, and go down into the bottoms and make their way to the river. And I always thought that all along early on, before I was mayor, I'd go up there and say, man, I'd walk around, it'd be nice to have trails, but when you have an area like that floods, it's hard to maintain those trails. So this is just a perfect thing that's happened to us, and we're very fortunate to have them with us. Like I say, it's a beautiful levee, and these floods are coming more and more. And what we're going to do is the wildlife and connecting the city back to the river, and for people to enjoy the wildlife. Already here at the end of the month, Fish and Wildlife is going to start putting up signs and identifying different birds and things that are out there on the other side of that levee. And like I say, it's just going to be an awesome opportunity for us. It's been a process. We started in 2019, and I hope to see it come to fruition here within the next 2 years. We're well on our way, but we have a lot with community partners. We have a levee board that is fortunately on board with us to do this, because they're in charge of keeping track of that levee and maintaining it and protecting this city. And sometimes it's leery when we have to, but what we're going to do is we're going to deed some land to the Fish and Wildlife. And it's going to be about 200 acres, and this is going on up and down. Fish and Wildlife is doing this up and down the corridor, and below us, there's in Chester, I believe they have one already set up. There's some over in Illinois across from us, and this is kind of a connector going all the way up and down the river. And one thing about this river for us is we're on the lower aspect of it. We have a lot of things we can't control. You know, we have several rivers. We have the Upper Mississippi River, the Illinois River, the Missouri River. We got the Merrimack River across the road. Across the river, we got the Kaskaskia rivers. We have a lot of rivers feeding this, and so flooding for us, it's going to be more and more. But I think this is gonna help. And one thing I think what happens with the river is being in an industry, people don't realize the importance of this river in transporting goods. I do, because I work on it, and part of it made my living off of that. And it's out of sight and out of mind. And the more projects we can do like this and get more people connected, I think we're better off, and we'll be able to get better funding and help to move some of these projects along. You know, I've been to Clarksville up there, and I watched that on the news. You know, we're fortunate to have a wall, and what the mayor goes through fighting that river up there, and it's just like, I'm so thankful for what we have, and look forward to what we can do and to help one another. And that's what it's all about as we go up and down this river, is helping one another, you know. And a little bit about this levee. It's this section here will be between Howell Island North and Jefferson County, Missouri, and south to Beaver Island in Illinois. Right now we have 50 acres of this in cropland. This area, like I say, it's going to be over 200 acres. So the cropland will eventually go away, but it'll still be used. The animals, it's just with Fish and Wildlife. I don't quite know how well that'll work with them, but it'll all connect. And I think it's just going to be an outstanding project. And like I say, there's a lot of community partners in this, a lot of people, you know, that are part of this, have been part of this, and it's been some vision for some people for a lot of years. And it's just cool to be able to see this to come into fruition. And recreation is big for all of us. You know, people, this day and age, people want recreation, and I always look forward to that. Any time we can add recreation, and this part of this levee project, when this first went into effect on the last phase of this was all about recreation, but it was so expensive to do what the Corps wanted to do. This is perfect because we're going to get help from Fish and Wildlife, and we're going to utilize recreation, and we're also going to help the floodplain too, and help our friends and neighbors south of us that are having to deal with floodwaters. So we're very fortunate, and I just thank you for all the opportunity to be a part of it. Addie, thank you for your work and with David and Happy. I'm very fortunate to have good people, great people that work for us and stay on top of things. And boy, and they do a good job of making me look good. So that's awesome. So with that, I'll hand it back. Thank you.
Mayor Eastern?
Yes. Thank you, Addie, for the overview of our study. And thank you, Mayor Hessler, Happy, and David for the detail regarding your approach to challenging of new problems facing legacy implements like levees. Next, we'll turn how exactly we restore natural infrastructure in the places Addie's study recommends and scale he prescribes. For this, we'll turn to our partners at Ducks Unlimited. DU has proven itself one of the world's foremost authorities in conservation and restoration. Us mayors are excited to partner with DU, translating that expertise into resilience for our cities and more reliably the global commodity supply chain. We're now working with DU to select 3 pilot locations along the corridor to deploy, restore natural infrastructure for combined purposes of providing habitat, increase biodiversity, achieving disaster resilience, improving water quality, and other benefits. Indeed, one of the projects we're working on with them will benefit my city by creating national flood storage at the Horseshoe Lake Wrigley, adjacent to my town. Dr. Ellen Hubert, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, so hopefully you are able to see my screen here. So thank you for having us as part of this partnership. I'm excited to talk to you guys today. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about our mission and our partnership with MRCTI, and then actually go right to my colleague, Mike Sertle, who is on site at a project right across the river from Mayor Smiley's city in Clarksville. And he's going to show us some of the work on the ground. So Ducks Unlimited has been around since 1937. It's no coincidence that we started the same year as the Soil Conservation Service, now the Natural Resource Conservation Service, because we started in response to habitat and environmental changes that were happening during the Dust Bowl. And so our mission is to conserve, restore, and manage wetlands and associated habitats for the benefit of migratory waterfowl. But these habitats, as we've talked about already today, have huge benefits to other wildlife and people. And you can see how important the Mississippi River Basin and the corridor are to our mission here in this map. We know these wetlands, they don't only provide habitat. I think Mayor Hostler and others before me have made a great case for this. They're also really important to recreation. As Mr. Wade and speakers before me brought up, one of the things that the pandemic really highlighted was access to green space and public lands, and that's a central part of our mission. So partners like state wildlife areas, parks, the Forest Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service, making more of these publicly accessible lands for recreation. There's also great benefits to water quality improvement, reducing floods, reducing erosion, and contributing to natural climate solutions. So just a very quick overview of how we work along this corridor and in the Mississippi River Basin. In the headwaters, we're doing wetland restoration and conservation. Those wetlands hold water and retain nutrients and help regulate the hydrologic cycle of the mainstem Mississippi River. On the mainstem, we're looking at things like bottomland restoration on public lands with our partners like Fish and Wildlife Service, who then manage those lands. Floodplain conservation easements. So these are private voluntary easements for conservation. And then as we get further down the river, we're working a lot with agricultural producers on the river through things like the Rice Stewardship Partnership. and all the way down to the mouth of the Mississippi. Some of the areas, actually, Adi has identified in his study, doing restoration at the mouth of the river that protects those communities at the terminus of the Mississippi. So our partnership with MRCTI is primarily focused on absorbing floodwaters. So we know this is as a figure from 2017 presidential disaster declarations. And you can see that there have been so many of those associated with inland flooding in those blue states, as well as coastal flooding. But we know that wetland loss has led to a loss of water storage on the main stem miss. And in fact, Mississippi River flooding is worse now than it has been in any time in the past 500 years. And there's scientific evidence that has much more to do with how we've altered the river, the floodplain, the headwaters, than it does the increase in precipitation that we're seeing, making that even worse. So restoring these floodplain communities, restoring bottomland gives us more water storage. In addition to those benefits, this is a graphic from our own work, restoring these floodplain habitats, particularly bottomland hardwood forests that are great at storing floodwater. They're also great at storing carbon dioxide. So as a natural climate solution, just our restoration with many partners up and down the river, we're looking at about 3 million tons of carbon sequestered by those forests, in addition to that floodwater. Because of that, because of the alignment of our goals for public recreation and tourism, increased habitat, water quality, natural climate solutions, and floodwater absorption, we've begun building this partnership to deploy natural infrastructure up and down the river with MRCTI cities and towns. A quick overview of how we work, and then we'll throw it out to the field. We are sort of a full service conservation organization. So we identify sites, build partnerships, acquire funding, do the design and permitting with our bioengineering staff. And then we also are often responsible for construction management. And that gives us a unique capacity to really work with the cities and towns to design and identify projects. And so just in the last couple of weeks here, we've got work ongoing all around mostly the St. Louis, East St. Louis metro area, as well as just north of Cape Girardeau. And here are a couple examples. These are pictures actually from this week from the field. So Rasky Slough, which is complexed with Horseshoe Lake that Mayor Eastern talked about, that project was completed just, I think, last week, increasing the storage volume. We're working now to also figure out what the design of the Horseshoe Lake main restoration will be. And ultimately, those projects will help get floodwater out of Horseshoe Lake and Rasky Slough. And those are also places where East St. Louis stormwater drains are entering. So giving the managers of these sites more capacity to take on that floodwater and then get it out of these units to accept more floodwater. We're also working on projects, the Big Muddy unit down just north of Cape Girardeau. These are oxbow lakes. They've had some head cut issues and they're no longer sort of holding water. That water is going right through them. So improving their capacity to hold water and then release it slowly after floods, as well as projects partnering with Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, and others at Two Rivers National Wildlife Refuge. You can see the guys there looking out over some of the units, but that's right at the confluence of the Mississippi and Illinois River, right next to the city of Grafton. And finally, where Mike will be discussing today here at Del Aire National Wildlife Refuge, and I'll throw it over to Mike to talk about that particular project.
Thank you, Ellen. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm actually coming to you from atop of the famous SNI levee. You can see Louisiana, Missouri back here behind me. Clarksville, just down here around the bend behind that island. And today we are at Del Aire National Wildlife Refuge behind me here. On the far side of those trees is the SNI ditch. So we're in a very unique area for today's discussion. As Ellen said, this is a big week for us. Tuesday, we wrapped up the Rasky Slough project at Horseshoe Lake. Yesterday, our guys were getting ready for construction down in the Big Muddy River bottoms. which outlets just north of Cape there. Today, we're up at Del Air. Well, it just happens the refuge staff we're meeting with today are the exact same refuge staff that St. Genevivie is working with. And we've already talked to them about your project this morning. We're going to see what we can do to help them reforest that, restore it, manage it. And we're going to talk about additional work that can be done from St. Louis with Middle Miss Refuge all the way down past Thebes to Powers Island. So a very exciting week. Tomorrow, we're going to be at the Riverland Center in West Alton, meeting with the Army Corps and the Fish and Wildlife Service to talk about projects in the confluence area. So very exciting week. But today at Del Air, we're here to talk about a number of things that meet kind of all 5 of those shared metrics between MRCTI and Ducks Unlimited. As you can see, I'm walking on the Snai. Well, as we all know, or some of us know in the area, the Snai is all sand. And for the folks that are engineers from ASCE, they know better than me, enough sand to hold water out for a while, but it seeps. So we're here today to look at, they're taking this seep water in when the river kicks up. How do we look at these old ag fields behind me? How do we allow these to capture this seep water? Ironically, it's going to get water filtered and a little bit of water quality come through all this sand. If we can capture it here, more of it on the refuge, then that's going to slow down and stop it from flowing right through into the Snai ditch, which comes out below the locking dam down here, that direction, and right into Clarksville. So very cool. We're going to look at water quality. We're going to look at flood storage. We got almost 600 acres of bottomland hardwoods they want to reforest here. As Ellen said, that is tons and tons of carbon sequestration. So a really cool project site. We're very excited about it. It's going to hit all those buttons. The refuge staff here, we're going to talk about improving their infrastructure, giving them the ability to upgrade what they have, manage more water, hold more water, release the water when they want to, not when the water really decides, and looking at some great reforestation projects. So a fantastic week for Ducks Unlimited and our partners. I was super excited to hear about the project in St. Jenny. I used to cover Southern Illinois and that part of Missouri, one of my favorite towns along the river. Super excited to talk to refuge staff today about those opportunities, as well as everything out here. So very excited to finally be out in the field, enjoying some beautiful time along the Mississippi River. My favorite, personally, born and raised. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to live from the field, and hopefully we have lots of great things to share with you all in the future. And with that, I will throw it back over to Colin.
Thank you so much, Mike. It is great to see you there right across where Mayor Smiley and I are going to wave. I don't think you can see us, but that is a fantastic. There you are. Hey.
Oh,
yeah.
Hello.
So Mike is just right over there. The Mississippi River is right behind us, and there is Mayor Smiley's beautiful gateway
Right there.
to the Mississippi. And then that's the island right there, right, Mayor? Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you, Mike. We look forward to working on all those projects with you and everything you just talked about, including that 600-acre slack of hardwoods. Yeah, Mayor Smiley got real excited about that when you mentioned that, because that's a great place for a lot of this water to go instead of where we're standing. And that's what we hope to achieve. We're now going to open it up to questions and discussion from the audience. We're actually right on time, even a little bit ahead of it, because folks have been efficient, and we appreciate that. A lot of great information in a short span. So Brant's going to help us out if there are any questions or items of clarity that folks may have from viewing the forum.
Please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A portion or the chat box. We'll be checking those, or you can also raise your hand and we can recognize you. But we don't need social distance when we have a river, right, Colin?
That's right. That's right. We even though we're all vaccinated right here, by the way, just a safety tip. Mike is already social distance from us.
Yes, indeed.
I'm not seeing any questions or any hands raised.
That must be
Well,
the
that's
information got
fine.
across.
Yeah. We absolutely want to thank all of our speakers and partners. As Mayor Smiley always tells me, I'm just a mayor. So we need our partners to make all of this happen.
Absolutely.
And we've got a lot on the line with us today. ASCE, the U.S. Chamber, Quantified Ventures, Ducks Unlimited, and 2 Degrees Adapt have just been absolutely self-starting partners for us. Many of them have come to us and asked, how can we help? And that is a fantastic place to begin. Tom, I see you hopping back on. Just want to say thank you for you and the Chamber for your global support of our River Valley and what we're trying to do. It's been great to work with you. And Dan and Addie and Ellen and her whole team with all of our partners. We think we can definitely make a real impact and get this work done. I do want to, just a couple of things we do want to mention while folks are thinking of possible questions coming down the pike very soon. So the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund, it's been authorized as Tom and Wade have talked about, but it needs to be funded. And it is authorized for $100 million for the upcoming fiscal year. So we do need Congress to fund that tool. Everyone that's on the line with us today, you can help us get that over the finish line. It does enjoy broad support from a lot of our delegations up and down the Mississippi River, but it is a national program. So if we can get that appropriated this year, we can start putting the RRF to work. And Mayor Smiley doesn't have to worry about applying for grants with that program. It's just a loan. And when she pays it back, it can go to the next mayor to help that mayor with his or her city. So it hence revolving loan fund. That's the first big thing. And the second, we are looking at a infrastructure package coming from Congress. 5th time's the charm, right, Tom? Yeah. We'll see if we can get this one over the finish line, but things like everything that we've talked about today, natural infrastructure, new resilience and innovative financing techniques that Dan has alluded to, and really making this adaptive to the situation on the ground. That's really going to make an infrastructure package successful. So we're hopeful. Of course, the more support that we can give to our delegations to move the package along and make it an actual reality, we all win, right?
You bet. And we all need to give that support.
Yep.
We need to make that effort.
That's right. Brant, are we good?
Yes, we are. No questions.
No
Okay.
questions.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being with us today for Infrastructure Week. I'm so happy that the President of the United States participated directly to kick off the week this year. That shows just how important this issue is to the country and to the leadership. So onward and upward.
You
Right,
bet.
Mayor? All right. Next time you see us will be in September. Please consider joining us live and in person in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for the MRCTI annual meeting, September 14th, 15th, and 16th. We'll actually get to see each other again.
Wonderful.
Physically.
Wonderful.
Physically.
Wonderful news.
Yes, so we're looking forward to that. And everybody that you heard from today will have so much more to share on how these projects develop and these partnerships move along by September. And we're excited about that. So thank you, everyone. Hope you've had a good and productive infrastructure week, and we get to see you at the end of the summer.
Thank you for being with us.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Great job, Colin. Thanks, everybody. Well done.
Thank you.